Hello everybody, welcome to my channel.
Gia Carangi was a pioneering American fashion model widely considered one of the first supermodels. Born on January 29, 1960, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, she rose to fame in the late 1970s and early 1980s, gracing the covers of major fashion magazines such as Vogue and Cosmopolitan and appearing in campaigns for high-profile designers like Armani, Dior, and Versace. Gia stood out not just for her striking androgynous beauty but for her magnetic presence in front of the camera. She was known for her dark hair, bold eyebrows, and a raw, edgy sensuality that set her apart from the more polished models of her era. Often described as both vulnerable and rebellious, she became a muse to many top photographers, including Francesco Scavullo and Chris von Wangenheim. However, Gia's life was marked by turbulence. She struggled with drug addiction, particularly heroin, which began to affect her career by the early 1980s. After several attempts at recovery and a retreat from the modeling scene, Gia was diagnosed with AIDS, a disease still heavily stigmatized at the time. She died on November 18, 1986, at just 26 years old, becoming one of the first famous women to die of AIDS-related complications. Gia's legacy lives on as a tragic icon of the fashion world. Her life was dramatized in the 1998 HBO film Gia, starring Angelina Jolie in a breakout role that earned her a Golden Globe Award. Today, Gia Carangi is remembered not only for her contributions to fashion but also for the haunting vulnerability and complexity she brought to her short life and career. Early life. Gia Marie Carangi was born on January 29, 1960, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to Joseph Carangi, a restaurant owner, and Kathleen Carangi, a homemaker. Her upbringing was troubled. Her parents had a tumultuous relationship, and her mother left the family when Gia was still a teenager. This abandonment deeply affected Gia, who often sought emotional connection and validation from others. She was a fan of David Bowie and found comfort in his gender-fluid image and outsider identity. As a teenager, she hung out with a group of friends known as the Bowie Kids, a circle of young people who embraced glam rock and nonconformity. This crowd and lifestyle gave her a sense of belonging, but also exposed her early to partying and drug use. Modeling career. Gia moved to New York City at the age of 17 to pursue modeling. She quickly caught the attention of Wilhelmina Cooper, a former model and founder of Wilhelmina Models, who took Gia under her wing. With Wilhelmina's guidance, Gia's career skyrocketed. By 1979, she was one of the most in-demand models in the industry. She appeared on the covers of international editions of Vogue, Cosmopolitan, and was featured in high-profile ad campaigns for Versace, Armani, Dior, and Yves Saint Laurent. Photographers loved her. She had an instinctive ability to move in front of the camera and bring emotion to a still image. Francesco Scavullo, one of the top fashion photographers of the era, famously said that Gia didn't just pose, she felt the camera. Her beauty was described as raw, earthy, and emotionally intense. Downfall. Gia's career began to falter around 1980, after the sudden death of Wilhelmina Cooper from cancer. Without that mentorship and stability, Gia's drug use worsened, particularly her heroin addiction. Her increasing unreliability led to fewer bookings, and she gained a reputation for being difficult to work with. She entered rehab multiple times and tried to return to modeling, but the industry had largely moved on. Gia briefly worked as a cashier and took on odd jobs, trying to stay clean. Eventually, she left modeling altogether. Final years and death. In 1985, Gia was diagnosed with AIDS, a time when the disease was still heavily stigmatized and poorly understood. She had contracted it through intravenous drug use. She spent her final months in and out of hospitals and returned to Philadelphia, where she lived with her mother. Gia died on November 18, 1986, at just 26 years old. Her death received little attention in the fashion world at the time, and she was largely forgotten by the industry that once idolized her. Legacy Gia's story became more widely known after the release of the 1998 HBO film Gia, starring Angelina Jolie. The film was a critical success, and Jolie's powerful portrayal brought renewed attention to Gia's life and struggles. Jolie won a Golden Globe and other awards for the role, and the film re-established Gia as a cultural icon. Gia is often referred to as the first supermodel, preceding others like Cindy Crawford and Naomi Campbell. But unlike her successors, her fame was short-lived and marked by a haunting vulnerability that has since become central to her legend. She is also remembered as one of the first high-profile women to die of AIDS, a disease that had, until then, been largely associated with gay men. Her story brought a human face to the epidemic and underscored the importance of compassion, awareness, and support. Cultural impact. Gia is often cited in fashion history as a tragic figure of beauty and loss. Her life inspired numerous documentaries and retrospectives, including The Self-Destruction of Gia and Thing of Beauty, a biography by Stephen Fried. She is considered an LGBTQ+ icon, as she was openly involved with both men and women during her life, which was rare for public figures at the time. Her tombstone reads simply, "Remember me as a loving daughter." Gia's personality and inner struggles. Gia was often described as having a magnetic but fragile presence. In front of the camera, she was confident, expressive, and instinctively sensual. Off camera, though, she struggled with feelings of loneliness, abandonment, and emotional instability, stemming largely from her chaotic childhood and deep-seated need for affection and connection. Those who knew her best said she was vulnerable and sensitive, often craving love in every direction, as author Stephen Fried put it in his biography Thing of Beauty. Gia was the type of person who would fall in love quickly and intensely. Her relationships were often passionate but turbulent. Rainbow flag sexuality and relationships. Gia was openly involved with both men and women at a time when such openness was rare, especially in mainstream media. Though she never labeled her sexuality publicly, Gia had several romantic relationships with women, and these were often deeply meaningful to her. One of her most significant and tumultuous relationships was with Sandy Linter, a well-known makeup artist. Their relationship has become almost legendary, symbolizing both the emotional highs and deep heartbreak that mark Gia's personal life. Photos of the two together show real intimacy and affection, but like many parts of Gia's life, their relationship was complicated by drugs and emotional volatility. Shot addiction and its role in her decline. Gia's addiction to heroin was both a personal struggle and a reflection of the drug-saturated culture of 1980s New York fashion. Drug use was rampant among models, photographers, and agents at the time, and Gia fell into that world easily, often using heroin as a way to self-medicate her trauma, anxiety, and feelings of emptiness. Her arms became scarred from needle use, so much so that photographers had to airbrush or avoid shooting certain angles. In her later photo shoots, especially those taken during attempted comebacks, the change in her appearance was visible. She looked distant, detached, and tired, her once vibrant energy dimmed. Despite multiple stints in rehab, Gia never fully overcame her addiction. She was often in and out of treatment centers, and though she sometimes emerged with hope and clarity, the grip of addiction always pulled her back. Microbe AIDS diagnosis and isolation. Gia's diagnosis with AIDS in the mid-1980s was shrouded in secrecy. At the time, AIDS was misunderstood, heavily stigmatized, and associated almost exclusively with gay men. Gia's illness was rarely talked about until after her death. She was hospitalized at Hahnemann University Hospital in Philadelphia, largely isolated.
Thanks for watching. Bye bye. See you again.